Okay, we are good to go, Diksha.
All right. I think, yes, we are live. So, a very good evening, everyone. This is Diksha Tiwari, extending a very warm welcome to all our participants on Zoom and all those watching us live on different social media platforms. Of course, a very special welcome to all our panelists for this webinar. The Tata Group, where sports, of course, has been a way of life, is back with yet another interesting sports webinar. And this time, it is cricket. And what better time to host it when cricket enthusiasts all over the world are glued to their favorite game, courtesy the Indian Premier League. So in cricket, of course, fast bowlers are a sight to watch, a different breed altogether. Remember Michael Holding, Dennis Lillee, Glenn McGraw, Malcolm Marshall, Ian Botham, Richard Hadley, Kapil Dev, Wasim Akram, James Anderson, or even Kagiso Rabada. I mean, the name could just go on, the list could just go on. So the high arm action, the fluid movement of the body as the bowler leaps into the crease, that's almost poetry. Yes, we will discuss fast bowling in this conversation of today and try to understand from those who understand what it takes to be a fast bowler and the mechanics of the body of which so much is demanded. The workload, the injury, the discipline, and management, all that is required. Which is why we are calling it the Fast Bowling Clinic. How good technique, strength, and conditioning makes a bowler better. And for that, we have three experts with us today. And please welcome all of them as I take this pleasure to introduce them to all of our guests today who are watching us live. So we have with us Mr. Mark Porteous. Please, a very warm welcome to you, Mr. Mark.
Hello, and thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
Yes, he's a qualified sport biomechanist from Australia, obtaining his PhD from the University of Western Australia. In a career spanning 20 plus years, he's worked as a full-time cricket biomechanist at the Australian Institute of Sport, the SSSM manager for Cricket Australia, the head of movement sciences at the AIS, and for the International Cricket Council as a sports science and high performance systems consultant. He has biomechanically analyzed more than 250 developing and elite fast and spin bowlers, including Glenn McGraw, Brett Lee, Ellis Perry, Mitchell Johnson, Harbhajan Singh, Stuart Clark, Shane Watson, Srishant, and Ryan Harris. Much of his research has informed back injury and illegal action policy and education programs across the cricket world. He also holds an adjunct position at the University of Queensland within their Human Movement Department. As a keen fast bowler himself, he played first grade club cricket in Sydney and West Yorkshire in the 1990s. A renowned Australian biomechanist, MD of Praxis Performance Group and the Pace Doctor, we're really privileged to have you with us today. Well, moving on, our next panelist, former Indian Test and ODI cricketer, ex-chief coach, MRF Pace Foundation, Mr. T.A. Shekhar. A tall and well-built fast medium bowler, he was probably the fastest ever in India in the early 1980s. He played 2 tests in Pakistan in 1982-83, played 4 one-day international as well, the last against England in 1985, briefly came back into the reckoning for the tour of West Indies in 1989. He became chief coach at the MRF Pace Foundation from 1987 to 2008, working alongside Dennis Lillee, helping to produce leading pace bowlers all across the world. Mr. Shekhar has since then held multiple management and talent advisory roles for franchises in the Indian Premier League, currently the advisor for talent scouting strategy at the Mumbai Indians. He loves watching, studying, and coaching fast bowling. So a very warm welcome to you, Mr. Shekhar.
Thank you very much.
And yes, our third panelist and a third expert, Mr. Stuart Karpinen, has over 25 years of experience in physical preparation and development of elite fast bowlers at international and domestic level, works for the Australian Institute of Sport as a science, technical, and development lead, engaged with Olympic and Commonwealth Games sports, previously worked for Bangladesh Cricket as GM, high performance, physical performance manager, and men's national team strength and conditioning coach. He trained many of Australia's best fast bowlers with both Cricket NSW and Cricket Australia as a men's team strength and conditioning coach. He's co-authored several articles on physiological demands of fast bowling, has been on peer review panels and served on advisory groups on fast bowling research. His fast bowling journey started with his selection to the AIS Cricket Academy. The same year, he also made his domestic list A debut for the Canberra Comets. He went on to play with the Western Warriors, playing both List A and first class cricket, a former Australian cricketer. I welcome Mr. Stewart to this wonderful webinar. Very warm welcome.
Thanks very much for having me.
And of course, my brilliant and wonderful co-host, Mr. Rajiv Seth, Project Director, NTHA Orissa. I've been introducing him every time, and it feels so good because I've been also learning a lot from him as part of these webinars. He's himself an ex-first-class cricketer from Bengal and Orissa, the first batch trainee and product of MRF Pace Foundation Madras, coached by the legendary Dennis Lilly himself. He's played as a professional in English and Scottish Premier Division leagues, has been completed his ACC, ACB Level 3 coaching education program. He has also coached Malaysian national cricket team in 2010. Currently an M-panel BCCI match referee, graduated from Hindu College, Delhi University, has done his special management from IIM Kolkata, had a short stint with Jamshedpur FC as well in the inaugural year, handling the administration and operation at Jamshedpur. He has also served in various capacities within Tata Steel before his current position of the project director of the Naval Tata Hockey Academy, Orissa. And let me just add that the academy has been doing some brilliant work in Orissa, nurturing some wonderful talents here in our state. And yes, this is Diksha Tiwari, journalist, anchor, television host, moderator, and of course, I'm also associated with one of the high performance centers of Orissa, which is the XCBS Ahluwalia Center of Excellence in Sports Management as their operation manager. So I would now like to hand this over to my co-host, Rajiv Seth, to take this forward from here.
Thank you, Diksha. Good evening to all. I think you made such a brilliant introduction. I thought you were a fast bowler when I first heard you, because you said things which really pleases the ears, and it's a great description. What can I say before we get started? It's kind of rekindling my days and my thoughts of MRF Pace Foundation, the time which we had to build a career, and who better than Shekhar being part of the panelist, who was a mentor and guide, friend, philosopher, whatever you call the Dennis Lilly. So the learning was immense. We gained, I think, most of us who who were part of this wonderful academy. I think they are very proud and privileged to be part of that academy in building their career in whichever way they could. So, gentlemen, ladies, boys and girls watching this, listening to us, I'm not going to stand between the experts you just heard about and the session ahead, because it's going to be very interesting. There's a lot of data, there's a lot of technicality, and there is a lot of discussion points which is waiting for us. So I'm going to come back in between and make a mention here and there. But before that, let me start this by requesting my senior colleague, Mr. T.S. Shekhar. Shekhar, if you could take it forward and get us started with the foundation of fast bowling, please.
Yeah, thank you, Rajiv. Thank you, Diksha. Hi, Mark and Stuart. It's a great pleasure to be part of the first webinar of Pace Doctor, along with the Naval Tata Academy. It's a great initiative, and I am really happy to be part of that. It's a web-based coaching website, online coaching of fast bowling and fast bowling strength, conditioning, and biomechanics, so people can access to it. Now, basically, we want to explain on how fast bowling has evolved in India. The genesis of fast bowling in India is India was known as a land of great spinners. And we had Subhash Guptes, and then Prasanna, Chandra, Bedi, Venkat. They're all great world-class spinners. And we also had some fast bowlers in Nizar, Amar Singh, Ramakant Desai in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. But after that, India was struggling to produce some fast bowlers. But in 1977, 78, the emergence of Kapil Dev has created a lot of furore on the fast bowling scene in India. A lot of young and upcoming fast bowler took Kapil Dev as a role model and then started bowling fast. And then Kapil Dev nearly played international cricket for more than 15 years and then ended up picking 434 wickets, out of which nearly about 250 wickets he has taken in Indian subcontinent conditions, which was a great record, I would say. So when Kapil was bowling, India was looking for somebody to bowl along with him. There are a few bowlers who played along with him, didn't play long. And Kapil, people started thinking, after Kapil, who we have. That is where the time the MRF Pace Foundation was launched by MRF. The great Dennis Lilly was at the helm of affairs, and then he brought the best in the business people in fast bowling to India. And I was very lucky to have associated with Dennis, and then I learned a lot about fast bowling, and it was a terrific association with Dennis Lee for 20 years at the MRF. And then I met Mark, and I met Stuart. I met so many legends of Australian cricket, and it was a great time I had. As we all know, that fast bowling is the toughest discipline in cricket because of its awkward movements and contortions one go through, for which the human body is not designed. And added to that, in those days, cricket was coined as a side-on game. Those days, many coaches, they said every fast bowler should be side-on, which was prescribed in those days in English coaching manual, irrespective of the posture or the back foot landing or whatever it is. So Dennis Lee came on the scene in 1971, created a huge impact in fast bowling, and then everybody was, he was terrorizing every batsman around the world. But in 72, Dennis Lee had a stress fracture on his back, and then he broke down in West Indies, and then he couldn't play for about 15, 16 months. And then he didn't undergo a surgery, but he took rest, and then he worked with a biomechanist and an Olympic sprint coach, and then remodeled this action. And then he came back in 73, 74, and then after that, he became from a tearaway fast bowler to bowler of more than 100% perfection. And then we reached the milestone of 355 wickets in 71 test matches. So so this is the time Australia did a lot of research from 1973, 74 to 1987, and they came out with some startling revelations. So they really redefined the bowling technique from the age-old side-on technique. Front-on technique was invented. Many of the West Indian fast bowlers were already practicing, but they never knew that they are front-on or side-on or whatever it is. Then what happened is the Australian bowlers could not remain front-on from the back foot landing to the front foot landing. So they invented another technique called semi-open. So which was followed by a lot of fast bowlers, modern day fast bowlers nowadays. And Malcolm Marshall was a great exponent of that bowling front-on technique. And I was talking about the olden days of fast bowling because when everybody was practicing side-on, the people tend to jump in the air and twist their upper body, and then they try to get into side-on position. This resulted in people getting into pass side-on. You can see the slide there. Sean Tate was one of the bowler who was a pass side-on and developed a lot of injuries on his back, and then he had to cut short his career. So three different type of techniques were been defined by Australian research team. And then they also found out that a lot of Australian under-19 boys were undergoing a lot of injuries. So why it is happening? Because they found out that a lot of mixed technique was happening in the with the bowlers. So neither they are side on nor they are front on. So they're all getting into mixed action where it is creating a lot of pressure on the back, and then they are breaking down. So if you look at the slides, so you can see the shoulder open and then the bottom half, their hips closed. And the second slide is shoulder is side on and then hips past side on. And the third slide is shoulders side on and hips open. So these are the different type of mixed technique which creates a lot of pressure on the back, and then it also creates a lot of inefficiency in your bowling action. So regarding this, I think Mark will be able to explain you how biomechanics helps a fast bowler in correcting his technique, and then the fear of injury can be reduced if you follow the biomechanic principle of fast bowling. I think I hand over to Mark. I think he's an expert on biomechanics. He's been practicing for the last 20 years. He's one of the founder member of this PACE doctor. Hand over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Shaker. Thank you. Thanks for giving that very interesting history. And yes, a lot of this wouldn't have happened without you and when I met you 20 years ago at Chennai. So it's been terrific. I'm sharing my screen there. Are you guys seeing that okay? Yep. All right. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to follow on from Shaker's overview there and history and talk about good technique and strength and conditioning. Stuart's going to handle the strength and conditioning part, and Stuart's a specialist in that area. And I'll handle the good technique part, being the biomechanist. So there's a little outline of what we're offering today. The good technique part, I'll talk about run-up speed and momentum, alignment through the delivery stride, and something I'm calling the stiffness paradox. And hopefully this will all make sense as we work through it. And then Stuart's going to talk about the strength and conditioning side. And we hope that that you'll see the synergy between what I present and what Stuart's present and what Shaker's just been talking about. And things actually work together really nicely if they're well planned and well supported. So Stuart will talk about why strength and conditioning is important, what are the different types of strength and conditioning and what's important for different fast bowlers, and then warm-ups. So obviously when you look at any great fast bowler from around the world, one thing I think that strikes you is how well they move through the run-up and how hard they hit the crease. Most elite fast bowlers are moving at quite a speed and hitting the crease quite hard. So they're generating a lot of momentum through their run-up. And so momentum is really just the concept of all your weight or your mass and times your velocity in simple terms. So a big truck has a lot of momentum when it's moving versus a small scooter doesn't have a lot of momentum because of its reduced mass if they're both going at the same speed in particular. Run-up speed and ball speed has been researched a fair bit over the years, and you can see along the top here with this interesting little scale I've got here is just a scale of correlation coefficients. So the correlation coefficient just measures the strength of a relationship between two things. It doesn't necessarily mean one thing causes the other, but as one thing rises or one thing goes down, another thing happens with another variable. So run-up speed and ball speed are the two variables that are measured a lot. There's a few different ways to look at that. But the correlation generally across a number of research studies, half a dozen research studies or so, has been around 0.59 to 0.7. So as the run-up speed gets faster, ball speed gets faster. And as you can see here, this is an example of one of the reports that we'll provide with a pace doctor technique analysis, and we measure your run-up speed from the video that our clients supply, and look at the ball speeds and actually calculate a correlation coefficient for the individual bowler. So in the example here, we've got Jebediah. His correlation's quite weak, 0.39. So he's not in line with the other research. And that doesn't mean he's not running in fast enough. That probably means that he's not using the momentum that he's generating in his run-up to deliver his ball speed. So he's got some technical changes through the delivery stride to make. He's not as efficient as he could be. Another problem that we see with run-ups in particular is the direction of the momentum. So here we've got some diagrams of a common error. So over here on the left of your screen, a common error is the angled run-up, resulting in a delivery stride that ends up pointing towards fine leg. So the feet, the back foot and the front foot pointing, if you draw a line through them, are pointing towards fine leg, and the bowler ends up having to bowl around themselves. And that creates a lot of efficiencies in the delivery stride, and I'll show you some examples of that. So it's just really, there's nothing too complicated about this. That's just really a simple geometry that a child in primary school would learn. And there's a couple of common suggested run-up corrections to that. You can either straighten the run-up, and you see a lot of modern fast bowlers have a very straight run-up these days. Or you can even have you can still have the run-up start at an angle, but there's a little correction just before the bowler takes off in their flight phase, before they hit the delivery stride. And actually Dennis Lillee himself was one of those bowlers that did that, particularly in the second half of his career, where his technique was highly efficient, highly smooth and highly regarded. So this is an example of that same concept, and you can see the bowler along the top there, the image series there, and you can see through, look at these images over here, just as he's releasing the ball, how laterally flexed he is, so how bent sideways he is. So his head is actually parallel to the ground almost. That's how laterally flexed he is. And one of the reasons he's doing this is because he's if we plot his run up from overhead, you can see what we're talking about, that concept I was just talking about. The angle of his momentum is all heading towards fine leg. So here the target where he really wants to bowl is straight down here at the stumps. So here's all his momentum's heading towards fine leg here on the bottom left. He needs to get the ball going down there towards the stumps. So often these bowlers will end up either laterally flexing or start splaying their arms and legs out towards second slip to try and correct for the momentum going that way. So they're trying to pull the momentum back, and the end result is the ball going down the middle. And so that leads us to alignment in the delivery stride. So when we talk about alignment in a few different ways, but in this case, alignment through delivery stride is looking at how are all the motions of the body, the arms and the legs and the head moving through the delivery stride, and are they moving at the target? And generally we consider the batter's stumps as the target. It might be slightly different, especially these days with the short forms of the game, 2020 cricket. We're bowling wider Yorkers and that sort of thing. But in general terms, around the batter's stumps is the target. And so what we're really looking for when we analyse a bowler is just general efficiency. Are all the levers, all the legs, all the arms, is the head moving towards the target? So you can see here in this top right picture here, there's two pictures. There's two pictures there of two different bowlers. From side on, they look relatively similar, but from front on, you can see the head of this bowler at the top, way outside the front foot. So that line of gravity going down from the head is right outside the front foot. Quite an unstable position to be releasing the ball. As you can see, this bowler here in a much more stable, balanced position. So we'd suggest that this bowler here is actually in a much better position to generate pace easily, and also to control the ball, have better control of the ball. The margin for error is much greater as well, because even if they're slightly early or slightly late releasing the ball, they're doing it down the plane of the wicket, down the plane of the target. There's another example of a young fast bowler that we've just analysed recently here through the Pace Doctor service. And you can see here, this bowler is not excessive, but there is still a bit of a pattern of their pulling away, laterally flexing through the trunk, through ball release here in particular. And that's because a lot of his momentum is starting to head towards fine leg at the end of his run-up phase before he jumps. So often a correction here is actually just fixing the angle of the run-up and fixing the jump. So one recommendation, you get some lateral flexion in all fast bowlers, that's expected. In some research papers, that lateral flexions come out as a risk factor for injury. Some research papers, the link has not been so clear. But you can see this white dashed line is a recommendation for this fast bowler to try and correct him, getting a little bit more upright through ball release. And then one of India's own, Jasprit Bumrah, who's looks quite unorthodox, but some of his biomechanics are excellent. And you can see there just before ball release, he's in a fairly good position. He's fairly well rotated around towards probably the gully position there, but he's pretty upright through ball release there, and he's only there for a split second. But he's nice and tall, comes over the top, gets a great seam and great pace, as we know. Interesting, he's got a more modern run-up, I suppose you'd say, where he's a bit shorter, but he generates a lot of his pace through the delivery stride and his long levered action. So he's quite unusual, but he's extremely effective. A very fine fast bowler, but great body position there. Something where if you contrast that body position to, if I go back a couple, to that body position, that's actually quite a drastic difference. So Jasprit's in a much better position to generate pace more efficiently, and also to control the ball, control where it's going, bowler where he wants it to go. Great head position. So often the head is a great indicator of what's happening down below. Look where the head is, what's the head doing, and I'd say that for batting as well. And then my third piece before I hand over to Stuart is what I call the stiffness paradox. And so looking at Jasprit here, his front leg there is stiff and extended and straight, not bent through the front knee. So obviously he generates pace. He bowls over that rigid front leg, helps him generate pace. And what that rigid front leg's doing, we've analysed that in the biomechanics laboratory at the AIS over many years. When that front leg is stiff, it increases the braking forces. So it actually increases the forces on the force plates when you measure in the biomechanics laboratory. And those bowlers there's a fairly solid relationship, a moderate strength relationship between those braking forces and ball release. So they're stopping the momentum from the delivery stride, and they're transferring it up through efficiently right up into the ball to generate ball speed. But that has some risks, that has some trade-offs. And when we talk about stiffness, and when I talk about stiffness, probably one way to get your head around is just to think about suspension in a car. So you can have nice soft ride suspension. So a lot of those American cars, the Americans love their soft suspension where the ride is soft and you're going over bumps and it's nice and gentle, great suspension, versus more the sports type sedan where the suspension's a bit stiffer, the wheels, the tyres are lower profile, and the ride is bumpier. So they tend to be more performance vehicles, but the ride is bumpier, the ride is harsher. And it's a similar, and that analogy sort of comes back quite nicely to the fast bowler. The fast bowler's stiffer, they're more of a performance machine. But the ride is bumpier. They're getting more forces. They're getting more impact forces. So they need to be in good condition to be able to absorb that. If you're not fit and you're using one of these techniques, you're probably going to increase your risk of injury. So there's a trade-off there, and that's why I call it the stiffness paradox. You need to be in great physical condition to actually use a good technique. Applying the stiffness model to the human, it's been looked at in gait a fair bit over a number of years. You can look at it as the whole lower body and the stiffness of the lower body. So that includes the ankle, the knee complex, and the hip and the pelvis complex all together. And then individually at the joints themselves. And you see in the right image there, those representations of the little springs, those little suspension springs at each joint as well. So the softer the ride, the more that center of gravity will dip down and through the gait stride. Similar with fast bowling, the softer the knee, the more it collapses. The softer the ride, and there might be some reasons why fast bowlers do collapse at the front knee. It could be to do with pain, but generally they won't bowl as quick. But like all good science, there's always an exception to the rule that one size doesn't fit all. Here's an image series of two fast bowlers that have bowled 160 kilometres per hour in their time. That delivery at the top is Brett Lee bowling in New Zealand. He clocked 156 kilometres per hour in this delivery. In this same over, he actually hit 161. He's bowling a nice no ball there, you may see too. But the ball release is right there, so the ball's just about to leave the hand there, and you can see his front leg through there, pretty stiff. When he lands over here, it's pretty straight, pretty stiff there, and he locks that up, and he rotates over that front pivot. That leg is a pivot. Here's another fella from Pakistan, Shoaib Akhtar, who also bowled pretty quick. He actually doesn't use the fully extended straight leg, but his leg actually just still stays braced. So he's landing at front foot landing about here. He's got a front leg, and he actually starts to flex his leg through ball release, and there's ball release just before ball release there. You can see his front knee is slightly flexed, but it's braced. Okay, he's not collapsing. So he's got a bit of a flexion to help absorb the shock, and he did run in pretty quick. And Stuart's going to talk about that. The more you run in, the higher you jump, the higher your reaction forces will be. Here's a few other examples. Love the real world examples. So here's 4 quicks from the 1970s. So this is actually, these are pictures from 1979 World's Fastest Bowler competition that they conducted in Perth when World Series cricket was on. So Imran Khan, Dennis Lillee, Andy Roberts, Jeff Thompson. 4 of the fastest in that competition there. Jeff Thompson won that competition. Jeff's down the bottom there. And you can see Jeff with his ultra side on, very slingshot type action. Great biomechanics. Jeff Thompson at ball release, which is this image here. The stiff front leg. So he pretty much lands with a straight front leg and keeps it stiff all the way through and rotates over the top. Andy Roberts, fairly fierce fast bowler as well. He bowls over the braced front leg there. Dennis Lillee, one above him. He probably wasn't as quick by this time, but he was still handy. He was still pushing up towards 140. He's bowling over a bent front leg there, that ball release there. And Imran Khan, who was quite sharp back then, 1979, hitting 140. He was bowling over the stiff front leg there. So it's not necessarily one size fits all. Theoretically, the ideal we talk about, and this takes to be in great physical condition. You can see here's Mitchell Johnson in the laboratory and out in the field. And when you've got these guys in the laboratory and you get them stripped down, you can see what great athletes many of them are. But also his technique. So there he lands there, front foot landing, fairly straight leg, actually flexes slightly before ball release and then extends again right up for ball release. So there's the ball coming out of the hand up there. All right, so he's what we call a flexor or extender. And so that flexion between there and there helps him absorb some shock and then he stiffens up to increase those braking forces, to slow himself right down through his lower body, to help transfer all his run-up momentum back up through his body into the ball. And he did that from a young age. It's not something he knew he was doing, but he did it very well, very good athlete. And Stuart was one of the fellas that helped train him to be the fine athlete he became as a fast bowler for Australia. So that's the theoretical ideal. Not everyone does it. We don't have to get everyone to try and do it. But the one thing I find is you will find some fast bowlers that do collapse through that front leg, and that is something we need to avoid. You do need to stiffen them up a bit, but they need to be in good condition. So is it the silver bullet? It's not the silver bullet. As you can see, Sean Tate is another one who bowled very fast, hit 160. He was very, very flexed and collapsed. He was probably an outlier in terms of all his biomechanics. He had some weird and wonderful things going on, but geez, on his day, he could bowl. Shoaib Akhtar, as we talked about, with that flexed front knee, it's not all what he had flexed either. And then Jofra Archer, he's another one that bowls pretty sharp these days, and he's bowling over that flexed front leg, so he's nice and stiff. He's got great momentum, great alignment, all heading at the target. He's a very efficient bowler. All right, that's me. I'll hand over to Stuart.
Porto, you've done some controls there, mate. Do you want to keep running with it?
I can. Good, are you saying that?
All right, so just to...
Good, are you saying that?
I'm saying that, yep.
Yep, that's fine.
Yep, that's fine.
I'll just pick up on a couple of points that I think are really relevant around the individual nature of the fast bowler. Our biomechanists are able to identify lots of different variation. Our coaches certainly take the individual that's in front of them into account how they coach them and the information and advice that they provide them. And I think the same approach needs to be taken with strength and conditioning, that there's not really a one size fits all. And, we've got to be wary of outliers at times. And I think we've kind of discussed that here. So I guess in talking about strength conditioning and strength conditioning preparation, we're talking about a majority, but I think you do need to be mindful of the outliers at times. So there shouldn't be a one size fits all. So I guess the first thing to answer is why do we need to take this individual approach? So I think we need to understand that our first starting point is looking at the physical demands that the fast bowlers have to go through. And what we see that with longer format, it generally requires a greater reserve of strength and conditioning to sustain that performance, because we see the longer formats are longer in duration, they have to bowl more deliveries, there's more days of play, and they cover further distances in the field. So all our research shows and suggests that it's quite linear. Thanks, Mark. So the second, our second step is really around assessing the individual bowler that we've got in front. So our starting point is obviously looking at the age of the bowler that we have. Oh, jump one. So we've got the age of the bowler, but we also need to understand the training age of that particular bowler that we have. And Mark made some interesting comments, or made some really relevant comments recently, that quite often we get players that have been playing cricket, but they may not necessarily always been fast bowlers. And I think that's something that we need to be mindful of. And Australia recently has had two really good examples of that, with Mitchell Starc and Trent Copeland, who ultimately open the bowling for the country, but through junior age cricket, we're actually looking. So just because we have an athlete standing in front of us at a certain age, we need to have some indication of how long have they actually been fast bowlers for. And as Mark and Sheikh have indicated, that technique plays a really important part in this. And the technique in this instance, in terms of the strength and conditioning, is it really governs how we prepare them physically, because of the different techniques that they use stress the bodies in different ways. So that's really important to acknowledge. Additionally, how much are they playing? So, are you dealing with someone within representative cricket, in high performance pathway cricket, or is it someone just in club cricket is a factor that needs to be taken into consideration. And then lastly, that how fit and strong are they currently? So remember, no two bowlers are ever the same. So I think there's a couple of things to remember with strength training and its benefits for fast bowlers. Is that I think everyone immediately assumes that it means an increase in pace, but look, that takes considerable skill. It takes a lot of buy-in from athletes. It takes, again, good assessment, good coaching, and a good program as well. So just doing strength training alone isn't going to get you, doesn't guarantee increases in pace. But there are other areas that we can get some wins. So one of the things that can help is that we have a greater strength reserve as a fast bowler. So in essence, if we have a strength reserve, then probably our level of fatigue is slightly higher. Strength is also shown with running mechanics to help improve running economy, and by that we mean that we can run at the same speed without using as much energy. But then conversely, we've also seen increases in strength performance enable athletes to actually be able to run faster. So it's quite relevant for some athletes that they're able to, with their bowling actions, the higher run-up velocity is really important in some instances. So moving on to the last couple of factors here, reduced collapse at back foot contact is really important. If an athlete's stronger and able to hold themselves up, then generally what we see is they're able to maintain a better alignment. So it can help with the consistency. And additionally, this is one that is quite often overlooked in the improvements in strength training, is that we can see the athletes develop a shorter delivery stride. And it means that enables them to get a higher ball release through that shorter delivery stride. So it's not the other one that I've mentioned here is also too, just in terms of there is the potential for max ball velocity, but the overall average ball velocity can see increases as well, that people are able to sustain their pace that they have for longer. So there's some of the areas that strength training can benefit. Thanks, Mark. I think this is probably one of the really important things to remember with the effectiveness of your strength training program, and that what people, and this is certainly what's being done currently, but understanding the different demands that your trunk and lower body have in terms of how it develops strength. So if we look at it, if we look at how much strength is enough, well, we've got to understand that the ball itself is very, very light. It only weighs, anywhere between sort of 140 to 156 grams. So what we're trying to overcome with our upper body is very light. On the flip side, what we're having to absorb with our lower body is really high. And I know Mark's done a lot of research in that in terms of people's body weight and the impact of body weight. Mark could probably fill us in at the end of this, anywhere between sort of 6 and weight that can be generated. So in one instance, we've got a relatively light weight that needs to be moved really quickly. And in the other instance, we have to absorb an enormous amount of force really quickly. Added to that, the thing that holds those two all together, trunk, and how the trunk works and is able to hold those good positions. And as Mark highlighted before, limit the lateral flexion that we see at release. So what it is our training should be focused on upper body. The work that we do really is about moving stuff quickly, so it's at much lower load. Our trunk flexion and rotation is really important, and then really the lower body being able to produce strength quite quickly under quite high load. Thanks. So we've discussed the strength, the values and benefits that we can potentially get with strength training, strength and stability training, I should say. What are the benefits? So what are the benefits that we get in conditioning? So again, one of the benefits that we have is our improvement to be able to recover. So if we have better conditioning levels, it's not just being able to recover in between deliveries, but it's in between the overs, it's in between our spell, and it's in between multiple days. So your additional conditioning can help sustain that high level output. And again, with some bowlers, as I'll talk about some of the other slides, the ability to maintain high run-up velocities. And again, some of the studies that we've looked at, we've seen some hit 95% of their maximum velocity through that last 5 metres. And in some bowlers, in some instances, there is quite a high correlation. So if they're not fit and well conditioned, it's very hard to keep running in and maintain that that speed. And also too, the ability just to maintain their technique. And there's some suggestions too around, I guess, their ability to maintain concentration if they're slightly better conditioned. Thanks, Mark. So we've kind of discussed the different actions that we've seen, and this actually has implications. And this is really one of those occasions where you have to be mindful of the absolute that what we're saying here. So, like as a general rule of thumb, if we've got the 3 different actions here. So we've got Fidel Edwards, who's very side on. We've got Sammy, who's semi, and we've got Peter Siddle, who is front on. Now, generally speaking, we'd probably consider that the need for conditioning for the really side-on actions is not as much as the front-on bowlers. And the reason that we're saying that is what we typically see is much higher run-up velocities within the front-on bowlers. We generally see slightly lower run-up speeds and higher ground contact times with the more side-on bowling actions, where strength potentially comes into play. So really, the key thing here is it's not that the side-on bowlers don't need conditioning, they do, but if we're getting into being concerned about the improvements in their performance, it's understanding the difference at conditioning and strength play in them. So some have a priority of strength over conditioning, and others have a priority of conditioning over strength. And then we can put another layer to that if we look at the format that those athletes are having to play. So you can imagine if it's someone within T20 cricket specialist, or someone playing ODI, or someone playing 4-day match and test match cricket, then regardless, they're having to increase their conditioning for the longer the format. So looking just in summarising that, we look at remember to assess the individual, take into consideration their training age, technique, how often they're playing and what formats, and then have a look at their physical capabilities when looking to set up the program. All those things need to be taken into consideration. Now, how are we going for time here, people? Are we? We've got some footage here around the warm-ups, but also mindful that we've got some questions as well.
Carry on, Stuart.
Okay. All right. So one of the things I think within one of the ways to get improvements in the strength and conditioning is not wasting your warm-ups. So we've seen with some other sports that we've worked with, and we've looked at them over the pre-seasons, we've identified that in some instances with the warm-ups, there's over 16,000 movement patterns across the team that have occurred over the course of the season. So rather than making them do the same thing, use it as a chance to progress your athletes. And what I've provided here is probably some examples of how we work through those progressions. So these initial ones, looking at hip function, trunk function, sort of hip activation, is a good starting spot. They're non-specific. Then we want to progress to our next stage of exercises. Mark? I think it's on the next slide.
Yeah.
So on the left, we've got some. Oh, So again, in terms of the exercises, what we do is we go from being quite general to then starting to work through to become slightly more specific. So we can see with the exercise that we've got on the left-hand side there, this is really about stability and control and being able to hold good positions in single leg stance. Critical for our fast bowlers, obviously that landing is single leg at back foot contact, and then obviously at front foot and release. Again, the advantages of these types of exercises, there's not a lot of equipment that's required, and it's a really good starting point. I would suggest that any work that you can get your fast bowlers doing where they're having to hold positions and maintain control in a single leg is of really great value. We can then start to speed those exercises up. So although the footage probably isn't showing it, these exercises are done at a slightly quicker pace. So again, on the left-hand side, what we're seeing that we're trying to put as much force down through that box as possible. And then on the right-hand side, it's the upper body. This is fairly common these days in cricket warm-ups, the use of the med ball to help help sort of explosive activities with the upper body. So we can then move to the next part where we start to be really kind of honing in on the specifics of our fast bowling mechanics and how we replicate. Shaker, we've had some discussions around ways of maintaining good body positions at front foot and back foot contact. So these are a couple of drills that we can look at doing. You can see having to overcome, there's a platform that's slightly raised. So we can see if we play through those, we've got one where we have to step off with the back foot, short back foot contact and follow through. Yep. And then likewise one with the front. And then lastly, we have similar with actual running mechanics. So the running mechanics are obviously Mark highlighted at the beginning, the importance of a nice smooth run up. A couple of ways you can, a couple of exercises that you can do. Any acceleration drills with hands on hips prove quite valuable. The thing that we're trying to work on there is keep, obviously with our fast bowling action, there's a lot of motion and movement going on in the top half. This can affect the lower body. So it's not a bad drill, and just being able to make sure that we can maintain a really stable hip position by quietening down the arms. And then lastly, some sort of dynamic plyometric based activities with some bounding and hopping. All right. That's strength and conditioning
Stuart,
101.
Stuart, I have a question. Stuart, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Shaker.
Yeah, the thing is, you're showing.
You might want to put that through the chat, Shaker. My internet's probably not great.
So you're showing one platform like thing. Is it a soft one or a hard one? Stuart, can you hear me?
I think there is some issue at the Stuart's end. Maybe you can just put it in the chat box for him. Unless, Mark, you would like to take it up?
Yeah, Stuart, the platforms you were using, were they hard or soft?
I think Stuart is muted. Stuart is muted.
He is muted. I think he's having internet problems.
He's having internet problems. Yes.
Shakes.
I'll just see if turning my video off helps.
Okay,
Yes,
we can hear you loud and clear.
Stuart, can you hear us? We can hear you.
Did you get the question, Carps?
Mark, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How much
I'm
of
sorry, guys,
biomechanics-
my internet's dropping in and out.
Are you able to hear now, Stuart?
I think we'll come back to Stuart. In the meantime, let's, with Mark.
Mark, how much of biomechanics can help a fast bowler's technique?
Well, really, the biomechanics is, I suppose it's the science of human movement in terms of forces and motions, Shaker. So biomechanics is really important if you want to know what is actually happening in the technique. And, you know, a lot of those images we're showing Brett Lee and Shoaib Akhtar and Jasprit Bumrah, and it's, you know, the delivery stride's over in half a second. So biomechanics is one of those disciplines where it can get complicated really quickly, but I suppose the art is working with the coaches and helping the coaches know what's going on in the split second. And, you know, good coaches have got a good eye, like you've got a good eye, you see techniques and you see things sometimes that I don't see. But so I think, biomechanics is very important, especially when you've got important questions about how do people generate ball speed, or why are they getting injured, or what techniques are linked to swinging the ball. And Shaker and everyone, Stuart has just answered. I just typed to Stuart about that platform that you asked, Shaker, and he prefers the hard platform for power-based activities, and softer for stability. So you can get hard and soft, depends what you're trying to achieve. If you want to try to get stability, go softer. You're trying to get power, go hard.
Okay, how much of this back foot collapse will affect a bowler's efficiency?
It's a big one. You can lose a lot of energy, and really back foot collapse is setting you up for the rest of back foot landing is setting you up for the rest of the delivery stride, but it's really trying to help set everything up so you can transfer onto the front foot where really the big forces are happening. So front foot contact, the impact forces are on average around 7 times body weight. At back foot contact, the impact forces are around about 4 times body weight. So back foot landing is very important, and if it gets compromised, it can compromise the whole delivery stride and compromise the whole performance of the fast bowler. So it's an important part of it. But I've also, Shakes, having said that, I was just analysing a young fast bowler today. His back foot landing was actually pretty good, but his front foot landing was no good. So they're both important.
The thing is, what I've seen in my experience is the guys who are trying to really force themselves to be a side-on bowler, or they get past side-on, past side-on has a bigger back foot collapse, and then the side-on bowlers do have a bit of back foot collapse.
Yes.
Many of them, unless and otherwise they really land into the rock back position. But nowadays, nobody is teaching about the rock back position at all.
Yeah.
Because everybody is trying to run faster. Because as far as a fast bowler, side-on bowler is concerned, the run-up is something which you start slowly, gradually build up, reach the optimum speed, and then maintain the last 4 or 5 steps. But nowadays, everybody is asking them to run faster and faster.
Yeah.
So is that a cause for people to get back foot collapse or getting past side on?
Look, I think definitely, and as Stuart mentioned, I mean, when you're bowling side on, when they get in that side on position, contact time is longer. So, you know, the front on bowlers, they're through the delivery stride. You think of someone like Malcolm Marshall, you know, who's through the delivery stride really quickly. And then you think of someone like Darren Goff or Jeff Thompson, you know, there's very side-on bowlers. The contact times are longer, and that's where strength becomes important. So, you know, if they're spending longer on in contact times and they've still got high impact forces, and they aren't strong enough, that could lead to some back foot collapse. But having said that, I think in some side-on bowlers, I mean, it's okay if the knee flexes a little bit. It's okay if it does that. And it's a bit like that front foot concept. If there's a little bit of flex there, but it doesn't actually keep going and collapses, it's okay. It's okay. Because if they're flexing and then they're bracing, all right, they're still using their strength to start rotating their pelvis forward off that back leg. So the back leg is really important. It's a platform for the rest of the delivery stride.
So what you mean is that if the front foot collapses more, that you stay in the delivery stride for a longer time, which is making your action or your technique inefficient, is it not?
It can do, very much so, yeah. And you can start, and often that you might find, it gets quite complicated, and there's lots of causes and effects there. If you haven't got the strength and you start collapsing in the back foot, you start trying to generate pace through other mechanisms, like you start trying to twist and turn your upper body excessive amounts. Like there's twisting and turning there anyway, but you start trying to use muscle it. Remember, the term muscle it. They start trying to get all the pace from
Right, use your bowling arm more than the non-bowling arm, is it?
Yeah. And they start using, relying on their upper body strength, which becomes dangerous for the spine. Upper body strength's important, but the best fast bowlers use the momentum from the run up. So if your back foot collapsing, you're losing all the good work that you've done through the run up.
So I have one more question, because is that the length of the delivery stride changes from technique to technique? For a side on, it could be a bit longer. For a semi-open and front on, it could be a bit shorter. Or is it the same for all the three techniques?
It's a good question, Shakes. I don't think there's any. I don't recall any definitive research actually looking at the delivery stride and the various techniques. What's longer? The length of delivery stride has been linked to ball speed, but I think that finding really is what I'd call an incidental finding. It's more about run-up speed. So if someone's running in faster and their momentum is aligned at the target properly, the incidental aspect of the technique is the delivery stride gets longer. Shakes. Whether I don't believe there would be a strong relationship between technique type and delivery stride length. I think it would be more to do with the way the bowler's built, how long their legs are, all that sort of stuff.
Okay. See, how much of this good run up and load up will help them to get through the crease?
Yeah, very important. Very important, Shaker. I think look, the faster you can run in and you can still control it through the delivery stride, I think you're talking about the elite levels of performance. The risk is, and I've just analysed one of these a young bowler that he was actually running in too fast, because he couldn't control it through the delivery stride. So there's an individual optimum, and I'm wary to say run in as fast as you can. And sometimes I hear that being talked about, run in as fast as you can, but there's a point where if you run in too fast, you're actually not going to bowl faster, and your delivery stride is going to get compromised because you can't control it. So it's really running as fast as you can that you can tolerate, that your strength and conditioning can keep you doing it for.
Having worked with Dennis for quite a long time, Dennis was very big on his run up and the load up.
Yes.
Because according to Dennis, what he says is that if you run smoothly, because that's what made him a better bowler after his back injury, and then the load up, which he says that which is going to control your movement through the crease. So there are a lot of guys who try to run very stiff and not moving their arms while running, and then they take their hand behind the head and they're all over the shop. So run up and load up, particularly in the younger age group between 14 to 16, it's going to help a lot in getting their alignment at the crease a lot.
Yep.
Is it not?
Yes, I agree. And I think, root causes, what's happening with load up can have significant implications through the delivery stride. So if someone's got a load up, say where they're going short, loading up nice and short, and but can't stay short, and they start going out long and bouncing out long, they can actually start twisting their spine more than they need to. And then they struggle because they've got a big long lever, and the moment of inertia is bigger. It's harder for them to control, and sometimes that alignment can get skewed, and that can cause lateral flexion as well and stop them swinging the ball. So absolutely, run up and load up they're a beautiful part of the art of fast bowling, but it's an important part of the whole rhythmical action of the technique.
Actually, I was watching some of the international fast bowlers. I don't want to name the bowler, but he has changed his load up.
I think I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is, I don't know, because still he's able to generate 145 plus, but the thing is, it looks a bit different than what he was, because he was swinging the ball so well at that speed. Yes. And then I don't know why they tinker with the load up and then really spoil their actions.
Yeah, and it's almost, if I'm thinking who I'm, I know who you're talking about. I think it's almost like they've taken his load up away. There's almost no load up there at all.
Yes.
It's sort of gone very vanilla.
No, suddenly the thing is, you start trying to get the momentum, which you don't have that at all, but still he's trying to generate pace with his bowling arm, and then he doesn't use the non-bowling arm at all, because his load up is almost zilch.
Yes, zilch. Yep. Yes. Yeah. No. Look, I agree, and I'm not quite sure why that change has been made. I know he's received some criticism over the last couple of years about his inconsistency with swinging the ball. Like some days he swings the ball and some days he doesn't. When he swings the ball, he's extremely potent. And when he doesn't swing the ball at his pace, and we're talking 140 plus.
Yeah, he struggled quite a bit in the test match.
Yeah.
He was quite successful with the white ball, because he could bowl brilliant Yorkers.
So Mark, just coming in with a lot of inputs already given on the run-up. I was just wondering, for the benefit of many listeners and viewers, we've talked about run-up in length also, but how crucial is the run-up, for example, for a short VP run-up or a long rhythmic run-up? With the biomechanics studies involved, how has this run-up in fast bowling evolved over the years since 80s to now?
Yeah, it's I'm actually not aware of any published research that's looked at lengths of run-up and the effects of run-up, but definitely the speed through the run-up has been looked at, and what happens. And as we've mentioned, the front-on bowlers tend to accelerate through the run-up and don't decelerate. They keep going. They keep hitting the crease hard, and they keep going through the crease hard. And then the more side-on bowlers would hit a peak speed, probably 5 or 6 meters out from the stumps, and then just have a slight deceleration to help them gather and get into position, to get into that side-on position to jump. And we would see it sometimes in the biomechanics laboratory in Canberra, where you'd find fast bowlers have a long run up, and then they'd hit their peak speed and they'd cruise at their peak speed for 5, 6, 7 meters, and it's really quite inefficient. You don't need to cruise at your peak speed for 5, 6, or 7 meters. You really just need to hit it for a couple of meters. So that's where and strength and conditioning coaches can do this with their timing gates. And a good coach can eyeball it as well. Being efficient, you shorten your run up and you can still bowl with good control and good energy with a slightly shorter run up. it's going to serve you well over a number of years.
Wonderful.
I
Wonderful.
think Carbs is back. Seth, Carbs has come back.
Okay.
Include him
Wonderful.
as a panelist. He wants to participate.
Yeah, sure.
Rajiv, I can see some questions in the
Yeah. So
chat
Diksha,
box.
in the meantime, if you have any questions,
Yeah, there are some questions that have been asked, not just on this platform, but from other. So I'll just quickly take them. I think some of them have already been answered in the discussion, but there was one about, a question about the role of ground reaction force tried explosive.
I just missed that. Is that the role of ground reaction forces?
Yes, in making the delivery tried explosive.
Sorry, I missed that. It's dropping in and out.
It says, what is the role of ground reaction force in making the delivery tried explosive?
Do you hear that, Shakes?
Sorry?
Mr. Shekhar, would you like to take that?
I think, Mark, you take it because I'm not able to hear properly.
I can't hear properly. I can't hear it either. Sorry, Diksha. It keeps dropping in and out.
Is it okay now? Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, so the question is, what is the role of ground reaction force in making the delivery stride explosive? He's basically asking about the role of ground reaction force in the stride.
Yeah. Well, I think there's probably a couple of dimensions to that, and Stuart's probably got some value to add there. But I'll give you a bit to start. Really, it really depends on your relative strength. So the strength of the bowler to be able to handle those those high ground reaction forces, if they're not strong enough, those high ground reaction forces will probably end up making them that stiffness I talked about, the softer suspension, softer spring. They'll end up collapsing just to try and absorb and handle those impact forces. So it's a strength aspect that's really quite important there. Stuart, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. What we do tend to see is we can see, if you look at some bowlers bowl on an indoor surface, so an indoor that's synthetic, very hard and very efficient. Some bowlers can operate really well on there and bowl and generate good pace, but it doesn't always transfer if we get onto turf conditions and softer surfaces. So it really is, without trying to get too technical with it, we sort of refer to it the stretch shortening cycle and how, or reactive strength index. And it's really about how quickly we can apply force. So some activities that are really good, and there are ways that we can assess it. And we do see some athletes that can from a static jump, can jump really high. Some athletes can't, but then some athletes, if they take a bounce, can, and we use that as an assessment to determine their training. But some of the bounding exercises and lots of work involving sort of skipping and really taxing your calf and tendon complex work really well for being able to handle those high ground reaction forces. And the other thing too is just being able to land. So the types of activities that you may want to start would be the opposite. So off a box or off a small height is jumping down onto a single leg and being able to absorb that. That's a great place to start.
Okay, I think that should answer the question. There are many, but I'll just quick. One is about has height got to do anything with pace and bounce?
It's a great start.
Height, yeah, as in a bowler's height, absolutely. like naturally these bowlers are gonna the taller ones are gonna have longer limbs. So as Stuart says, you know, you can't change your genetics just yet. So if you're a good athlete and you're 6'8" and you're well coordinated and you can bowl fast, you're in a great position. Now, look, there were some fantastic fast bowlers that weren't that tall. You know, Dennis Lee was a great one. Malcolm Marshall was a great one. But it's definitely, height is excellent for generating pace and bounce. Yes.
Yeah, but of course you can't just rely on that. This is from a young guy who wants to just started playing, and he wants to know at where do you take a jump when you are bowling? He's someone who has just started bowling, and this is his question. A young boy called Aryan. So he wants to know when do you take a jump while bowling.
Shekhar, you can.
Sorry? I'm not able to because it's breaking a lot.
Okay, Diksha, you got to say it slowly.
Okay, so I said the question was from a young guy who has just started playing, and his question is that when do you start, when do you take a jump when you are bowling?
See, the thing is, I strongly feel jump is something which it should be natural to your bowling action, because you cannot manufacture a jump to bowl. I feel the way in which he is running, and then if the jump is natural to his action, then he should jump the second last step. Second last step, he should be taking a jump to get it, then landing on the back foot. So, unless I see the bowler is something, so it is very difficult to say offhand that you jump from this step correct on our part.
All right.
Mark,
Yes.
there is a Pace Foundation guy called Harvinder Singh Sodhi. He is asking, the hip and shoulder separation, does it happen naturally or it can be taught?
There's a couple of questions there on hip and shoulder separation, so I'll try and address them both, Shakes.
Yeah.
Yes, it does happen naturally. In any projectile activity, overhead, tennis, golf, football, kicking, the hips and the shoulders do separate to transfer energy through the body from the bigger. So the bigger, slower segments start first, and then they transfer that energy what's called distally, so through the chain. So it might start at the pelvis. Pelvis rotates first, creates separation between the pelvis and the shoulders, and the shoulders rotate, and then they sequentially all the parts of the body get quicker as it gets out to the bowling hand and the ball. So it's something that shouldn't really need to be taught. And hip and shoulder separation is a natural part of fast bowling. What the research is basically says about it is when it happens, and that can be problematic for back injuries, especially in teenage bowlers, well, particularly in teenage bowlers, not necessarily so much in the older bowlers. So it shouldn't need to be taught. It is an important part of fast bowling, and it's just an inherent part of human movement that the way it's called kinetic chain works.
Will it really help a bowler who's bowling around 130s?
Yeah, well, they're all doing it. In terms of ball speed and hip shoulder separation, the only research finding I'm aware of that has shown some sort of relationship is the timing of the maximum hip shoulder separation. So where we talk about a back foot landing, we want hips and shoulders to be in a similar
Alignment
plane.
with the back foot.
Yeah, at the back foot. but they will separate as you go through the delivery stride. And where that gets to the max point, being closer to ball release, was a weak correlation to ball speed in one research paper that was from the AIS. So it's important, and that's a lot of it's going to come naturally with your good strength conditioning, good flexibility, all those exercises you saw that magnificent athlete doing on those videos. Form the basis for that.
Good.
Stuart, can you hear me? I have a question for you.
Certainly, I'm back.
Yeah, okay. See, how can you improve the back foot collapse? By doing some body weight exercises, or you have to get into the gym, or you have to do some scientific exercises where it can reduce the back foot collapse? Because I could see a lot of Indian boys who are not strong enough, they get their back foot collapse in a big way, which affects their bowling in a big way.
Yeah, look, it's a very good question, and it's a little bit of a mixture of both. One of the starting points is actually the amount of mobility that can occur, particularly around the ankle and hip. I think that can sometimes have limiting factors or put us into position. So to take it back a step, I think it's very difficult to change people from the positions that they naturally able to get into, is because their body has got a range of motion that allows them into those positions. So coming back to it, one of the things I've been interested in looking at recently with the back foot collapse is actually ankle, the amount of movement it's in the ankle. You've probably seen it yourself. We get those bowlers that just kind of land on the forefoot and they never quite get that full contact. So in terms of the back foot collapse, I think it needs you've got to kind of tick off the list a little bit. Have a look at the range of ankle dorsiflexion, as we call it. Have a look at relative strength levels and control in some of those exercises that we showed before, and that's probably your starting point. Ideally, we start with body weight exercises, and then once someone can handle, with good control and good technique, those kind of exercises that we did before, then they can start to progressing to higher depth of jumps, more external load, but they really do need body weight activities with good technique as the foundation for that. So check that it's not their mobility that's impacting upon it. Have a look at their general stability and control, and then develop strength exercises.
Okay, will you suggest some exercises? You have to demonstrate them, but at least some exercises names, if you could suggest, because some of the boys could get to do those exercises like a deadlift or Bulgarian lunge or whatever it is. If it is going to help them to get better, to strengthen their glutes and then hamstrings and then the calf, so to get more stability on their back foot.
Yeah, it's really difficult to. Look, there's things like, if you look at box drops, so stepping off a box and controlling your landing, and single leg deadlifts as a start, single leg arabesque, single leg squat. They're really great starting points. Nail those down and get that foundation really good. Then progress to your deadlifts, your power cleans, your squats.
Okay. I think we are heading towards the end of this webinar, but we have few questions. I think we had great in-depth knowledge about fast bowling, but I think there are some viewers and listener friends who would be from other sports also, who would want to benefit from this session. So Stuart, just a quick one for you. There is a common misconception about most Indian athletes and even experts, as they tend to go straight into strengthening as part of the recovery process. But many feel that attaining stability is the most important part and then moving into strengthening. You being a strength and conditioning coach, what are your views?
I just need to check something that from strength and conditioning to recovery. I didn't quite understand that. Or are we saying?
So generally, what they say is the misconception amongst most athletes and coaches is they tend to go straight into strengthening as part of the recovery process. But many feel that attaining stability is the most important part, and then strengthening.
Yeah. Okay. Look, I'll be honest. I'm a little bit thrown by the part of recovery, but I'm assuming that it's maybe just a typo, and that we're talking about, do we start straight with
Correct.
resistance training, external weights? Is probably the question that I'm getting. Is that
correct?
Yeah. Okay. Look, it is very age dependent, and look, normally what we would do is we would focus on body weight based exercises, and lots of them. There's a reason for it, particularly with early age athletes, and the fact that they're still growing, there's still growth left in their bones, in their ligaments, their tendons. So what we don't want to do is, we probably wouldn't want to put them through resistance training, because the good thing with the resistance training and weight training is that muscle adapts very, very quickly. So you can get changes within weeks and months. The problem with bone, tendons, and connective tissue is very slow to adapt. So what we don't want is, we don't want a junior athlete accelerating really quickly their muscular development at the cost of the slower to respond, ligaments and tendons. So generally what we prescribe is, a thing called anatomical adaptation and body weight exercises first, to build a really strong, stable ligaments, tendons, joints, bone that can then handle the increase in muscle mass.
Correct. In the same breath, Stuart, I mean, what are your views about this off-season training to season training when it comes to strength and conditioning? Because there seems to be a mixed thoughts there also.
Look, the really important thing with pre-season and in-season programming is your planning and understanding of it. So, and again, it should involve all the relevant people and coaches and support staff of that team. So, number one, have you got a really clear understanding of your sport, of the physical demands? So, we can look at individual sports to get some ideas, but then there's also team sports, and within team sports, what are the demands of the different positions? So we've got a team that have got forwards, midfield, and back. What's the difference? You need to understand what the demands of your players are in matches, because then what you ultimately want to do is you then want to design your game plan to be able to play in season, and then it matches up in between. Are your players capable of playing this? Do your players have the physical capabilities to play this particular style of game? So that's how you design your pre-season. So it's, what do I know about the game? What do I need to do? How do we want to play? And you build your athletes, and you build your team towards that. And then likewise in season, it's just, again, good planning, understanding that throughout the course of the season, people are probably going to have a different response to the games. And are you aware of that? So, winning matches versus losing matches can have an impact on how players recover, the conditions, the environmental conditions that you play in, the amount of travel that you have to do. So again, good planning can help you determine when there might be some matches that are in season higher stress than others, and then you can then plan accordingly. So again, understand your planning of the pre-season, have a good look at the matches that are in season, the things you can and can't control, and then watch your athletes and plan accordingly.
Superb. Just another one for Mark. In fact, it's something which helps us also as match referees. Your work at the Australian Institute of Sport led to ICC's 15-degree elbow extension tolerance ruling. What was this and the change it brought in?
Thanks, Rajiv. Yeah, it was really just a description of an analysis, biomechanical analysis of what was really happening in elite cricket. So we measured fast bowlers bowling during test matches and one-day internationals. We got access to the Sydney Cricket Ground, Allan Border Field in Brisbane, and one of the grounds, not the Melbourne Cricket Ground, Etihad Stadium in Melbourne. And film guys got got our biomechanical equipment onto the field, and we measured how much elbow extension actually fast bowlers exhibited. How much were they actually doing during match conditions? And on average, it was about 9 degrees. And at the time, the MCC law stated 0 tolerance. So we pretty much showed that there was normal elbow extension in a bowling action, even bowling actions that looked considered normal, pure. When you measure it biomechanically down at 200 frames a second, there is some elbow extension, and it doesn't look like a chuck. It looks normal, but there is some there. So it just brought a bit of the science into the game and helped update the laws. So now when someone gets reported for a suspicious bowling action, there's 4 or 5 biomechanics laboratories around the world approved with the ICC protocol, and the bowler has to go to the laboratory and try and replicate their match action to get analysed. That's the big problem of it all, bowlers getting to replicate their match action. But yeah, this elbow extension is a pretty normal part of spin bowling and fast bowling. It's just how much they do. And generally, in my experience, most fast bowlers who look like they're chucking or are indeed chucking, their elbow extension way exceeds 15 degrees.
Okay. Interesting. I mean, I'm pretty much done with the questions I had. We can go on and on, but I think we'll since this is going to be series of fast bowling clinic, and we're going to be benefiting out of this insightful, the discussions time and again with all the legendary panelists we have here. I can maybe take a chance and finish with this with Shekhar. Shekhar, there is I mean, your story, especially about discovering Zahir Khan, is pretty interesting, and the great Dennis Lilly conversation with you regarding him. Can you share this story?
See, first I saw Zahir in Delhi. He was playing for the West Zone under-19 tournament before the, I think, 1997 World Cup. So he was not playing in the 11, but because I used to go there and scout for talent for the Pace Foundation at that time. So I saw this boy, and then he came to me, said, I want to come to the Pace Foundation. He said, what should I do? I said, you have already played, because the Pace Foundation criteria was somebody who has played in the under-19 or university, they are eligible to attend the trials. So since you have played for West Zone under-19, you are straight away eligible. But Dennis Lee is coming next month, January 18th to Chennai. So you reach Chennai on the 17th morning or something like that. So I took his address and then told him that Dennis Lee is coming on such a date. You reach on the 17th. But Zahir came on the 16th morning itself. And then he called from the station saying that you are supposed to come only tomorrow. We have made arrangements for your stay from tomorrow only. Anyhow, that time the Pace Foundation house didn't have many boys because most of them have gone back for playing Ranji Trophy. So I sent him to the Pace Foundation house. He took rest, and then evening the MRF team was practicing. So I asked him to come, and then Raman and others, everybody was there. And then they saw somebody left-arm seamers bowling. And then they asked me, who's this guy? This guy has come from Bombay. He has played West Zone under-19. They said, he looks really promising. But Dennis Lee and myself, when we used to chat that India should have a good left-arm fast bowler. Because the guys who have played for India from the Pace Foundation at that time, most of them were right-arm fast bowlers. So India should have a left-arm fast bowler. I said, I called up Dennis and then told him that there is a guy in India who has come to the Pace Foundation. You will see him when you reach on the 18th. So he saw him, watched him for 3-4 balls, and then he said that this boy is going to play for India. Because Dennis, I feel, what he can see, others can see in a video or something, he can see it with the naked eye because he had that hunch. So ultimately, he did play for India in 2 years' time.
The rest is history.
1999 Champions Trophy, 2000 Champions Trophy, he really troubled Steve a lot, and then got noticed. He bowled really well against Australia. India beat Australia in that Champions Trophy.
I mean, he always had the pace, but was he a good mover to start with when he first came? He
was quick. He was moving the ball because the thing is, what happens is all those bowlers who came to the pace round at the time were raw because they didn't have any. See, the thing is, only when Dennis came, the coaching of fast bowling was really became. This is what is fast bowling coaching. People came to know, because otherwise, what happens? They simply ran and bowled whatever they could, and then nobody was to tell them what are the flaws they have in their bowling. Nobody could tell. But only when Dennis came and then he introduced that video technology, and then people started seeing their own action. And then some of them got shock of their life because they thought they are having an action of Kapil Dev or Dennis Lilly or Wasim Akram or somebody. When they saw themselves on the video, they had the shock of their life. But Dennis, I would say the contribution from Kapil Dev to MRF to Dennis, India is now having lots and lots of fast bowlers knocking at the doors of Test. It is all because of that.
So true. And, that has been the story, of MRF Pace Foundation, as well as, the fast bowlers coming up in the ranks in our country, and also adopting to the technology over the years. Because I remember in those days when we came to Pace Foundation, we were still 15, 20. Shekhar, you would know, because there were things which were coming from Australia through Dennis, which was like alien to us,
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we are in fortunate times where today's generation has everything, or practically everything to them: good coaching, technology, accessibility to good data and good expertise. So I think that way we are very fortunate. So I think what we can do is, as
I would like to
Shekhar, you
mention
flagged
one thing,
also,
Rajiv, here. I would like to
yeah,
mention
sure.
one thing, Rajiv, here, because Pace Foundation was not, I think fast bowling was not practiced in India much, because India was a land of spinners. But when Pace Foundation started, there was a lot of resistance from various quarters of the Indian state cricket boards, particularly up north. There's a lot of resistance. But MRF really sustained that and then made sure that they continue to support it, and then that is where they produce results.
Good. And did you think that it's at that stage very quickly, when MRF became the international academy too, with people coming like Chaminda Was and other people, Olango, so that also made the difference? That also brought in about a change?
Yeah, the polarization has definitely made a big difference, because even Glenn McGrath came to the Pace Foundation because there was an MOU between MRF and Australian Cricket Board. They used to send their fast bowlers, and then we used to go there and then train with the Australian Cricket Academy, because when Rod Marsh was there, this MOU was came into force. That trying to the exchange program worked very well. Even now they are doing it. It's really good, actually. Because actually Indian Cricket Academy, the National Cricket Academy, was set up by Rodney Marsh.
Okay.
Because he was supposed to be the man behind for Australian Cricket Academy's success.
Superb, superb. So as I said, we are in good days, and what better way to end this webinar, having a complete update on Pace Foundation, Dennis Lilly's contribution towards Indian cricket in terms of fast bowling. And I just want to thank each one of you to giving me this privilege of hosting and moderating this webinar. Before I request my colleague Diksha Tiwari to give a vote of thanks. Thank you very much once again, Shekhar, Thank you, as you've been always
Thanks, Rajiv.
kind, and thank you, Stuart and Mark, for your wonderful, knowledge sharing. And we look forward to hearing from you more often. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Pleasure.
very much,
Thanks for having me.
guys. Pleasure.
Thank you, Rajiv. I don't think I have anything much to add here. You've already thanked all of them, and I can see some of our panelists have also been answering the questions that are up in the chat box. And but I think, like Rajiv has very rightly said, these are a series of webinars that are going to happen. We'll have more, so please stay glued to that, and there'll be more discussion. You can have more questions coming up, and I'm sure the panelists will be very happy to answer them as well. Would like to once again thank all our panelists, all the audience who have joined us from all across the globe for this one. Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure hosting all of you, and a wonderful audience as well who have stayed connected with us through all these. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stay fit. Stay safe. Namaskar.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks, everyone.